Jiri Prochazka vs Glover Teixeira is probably the greatest MMA fight I have seen to date. While I have not been watching MMA, or more specifically the UFC, for that long, only about 2 years, and while there are several other fights that, looking back on, were incredibly fun, Charles Oliveira vs Michael Chandler, Kennedy Nzechukwu vs Carlos Ulberg and Edson Barboza vs Giga Chikadze to name a few, the fight between Jiri and Glover really stands out. And this opinion is after nearly a week straight of thinking about little else, and a full rewatch, which, somehow rendered the fight even more enjoyable than the first watch. The storyline going in, the back and forth flow of the fight, and the emotional finish in the last 30 seconds made for such an enjoyable show. There was a lot of discussions surrounding this fight for the next several days. Naturally, there was an incredibly fun fight, with a very charismatic character and a new champion, but there are several widespread takes that I just do not agree with. And while I do realize the relevancy of a fight once the following week has passed has the lifespan of a wad of cotton candy in a puddle of water, I still would like to at least get these thoughts out there. 1. No, Jiri and Glover should not have an immediate rematch. An opinion I see from almost everyone is that there should be an immediate rematch. Reasons for this range from Glover being about to win the fight by decision to the fight being so good we need to see it again now to simply Glover being old and he doesn't have long left for a rematch if it isn't immediate. I disagree with all of these reasons. Firstly, the fact that Glover was winning the fight on the judges' cards is completely irrelevant. He didn't win. Not only that, but he gave up. Glover tapped. The points of a fight do not matter in the slightest if the fight doesn't go to decision. Many fights are won by the fighter who is down in points. Just because this particular fight was so close to the end when the finish took place doesn't change the fact that the finish nullified any points that were on the cards. The fight was won fairly and no one can honestly say otherwise. This is not a fair reason for a rematch as it takes away from Jiri's victory, and implies that he didn't deserve to win. The next reason I see in favor of an immediate rematch is that the fight was so good that it needs to happen again. However, it is this very reason that I don't want to see it again, at least immediately. The fight was good, very good, but in my opinion a rematch would actually take away from that significantly. A good fight like this needs to settle for a while, marinate in the minds of the audience. Not only that, but an immediate rematch would feel like a continuation of this fight, rather than a separate match altogether. Think of the Brandon Moreno vs Deiveson Figueiredo fight. Their first fight, a bombastic bloody war, ended in a draw. That fight needed an immediate rematch, and it got one. The first rematch ended far more conclusively than the first, and felt like a bow being tied on their initial fight. However, the second rematch, which was for some inane reason made immediately after the first, was completely unwelcome, in more ways than one. For one, no one wanted to see a title fight in that division between the same two guys again for a third time, but not only that, it felt like it undid the bow that so nicely tied the first fight up. It was unnecessary and disastrous. This is not something we need for Jiri and Glover. Their fight had a bow, a nice big red bow. Please, let's not undo that one too. The chances of their second fight being just as good as their first is slim at best. It won't be. And I, if no one else, want that fight to be remembered forever for the singular spectacular performance that it was. An immediate rematch will only taint that memory. Lastly, yes, while Glover is too old to expect a rematch if it isn't immediate, it simply doesn't matter. While unfortunate, this is just part of life. All fighters have their last fight and there will always be that one last matchup that never happened. But that is not a reason to immediately schedule a rematch if no other reasons exist. My general thoughts on immediate rematches is this: unless the fight was either incredible and ended on a draw, think Moreno vs Figueiredo's first fight, or had a horribly disappointing conclusion, primarily from the result of something external to the fight, or an unfortunate injury during the fight, think Jorge Masvidal vs Kamaru Usman's first fight, which was short notice and left a bad taste in everyone's mouths due to Usman simply holding Masvidal against the cage and stomping on his toes for 5 rounds straight. Or Aljamain Sterling vs Petr Yan with the disqualification and belt transfer due to a legal knee, or one of the many fights where legs were broken accidentally. Meaning any fight with Khalil Rountree doesn't qualify, as he tries to break legs. There should almost never be an immediate rematch, even for the best of fights. 2. No, Glover was not winning the fight. Okay, technically yes, Glover was winning the fight on the scorecards, but that was a close fight, and honestly it was closer than a lot of people think. Watching it live, I also thought that Glover was handily winning that fight as far as a decision goes. However, on a rewatch I completely switched my opinion. Not only did I think that the fight was far closer than I had originally, but I actually thought Jiri may have been up going into the 5th round. It was a very close fight, and while many people are trying to justify their frustration at seeing their fighter of choice, or the person they bet on, lose just before it went to decision, it simply isn't enough to justify Glover having some obvious victory in a decision. If Jiri had knocked Glover out within the final 28 seconds rather than submitted him, I do think people would not throw this idea around so much though. 3. No, Jiri and Glover did not make a lot of mistakes, and, what mistakes they may have made only made the fight more enjoyable. On a technical level, I personally did not see many mistakes, even on a rewatch with much more scrutiny. While the fight was frequently sloppy, it wasn't as riddled with mistakes as some people are making it out to be. It's a fight for goodness sake, what do you expect? Scraps are never picture perfect, even amongst professionals. When are struggles ever perfect? Lots of people are pointing to when Glover had Jiri on the ropes but tried to take him down and submit him as an example of one of the many mistakes, but honestly, I don't see this as a mistake necessarily. Besides, even Dominic Reyes, who fought Jiri just before, said the same exact scenario happened to him, and he reacted in the same way, claiming that the way Jiri shoves his head into his opponent's chest at those moments makes it feel like the right choice. While Reyes did admit to this being a mistake, I think that this is actually less of a mistake on Glover and Reyes' parts and more likely an actual tactic on Jiri's part. To be able to cause two opponents in a row to make the same mistake is almost certainly intentional, or at least coincidental skill. That said, no one was in Glover's position but him, and Reyes I suppose. No one knows who close Jiri was to being knocked out, and, considering Jiri is known for his odd movement and unexpected reactions to things, it's entirely possible that Glover did not think he was close to a knockout. Not only that, it's actually highly likely Jiri wasn't close to getting knocked out. Fighters react strongly to certain punches that they are able to push through very frequently. Jiri appearing to be on the ropes may have been nothing more than superficial appearance alone. Glover probably thought the submission attempt was the best route in that scenario. It's not like you can easily keep punching someone in the face when they have their head pressed up against your chest. And yes, Jiri did openly say that he made a lot of mistakes in his fight, but he tends to say that about every fight he has. Same thing happened with the Reyes fight. I take this more as him never feeling like he hit the highs that he aimed for. It's an aspiration thing. 4. No, just because the fight was not a technical masterpiece does not mean that it wasn't an incredible fight. As an answer to the general outpouring of hype for this fight, I've seen a lot of people downplay it by saying it wasn't very technical, but that doesn't matter at all. A fight doesn't need to be a technical masterpiece to be a good fight. Have you no respect for a brawl? High level of technicality does not make a fight fun. Sure, it may be impressive, but two fighters can dance around the octagon all day being technically perfect and achieving nothing. A good fight, and entertaining brawl, comes from so many other things: story, flow, hype, names, brutality, guts. Technicality is just one small part of many things that make a fight fun to watch, and honestly, it's one of the last things I, and most people, care about. Just look at Sean O'Malley vs Chris Moutinho. That fight was almost pathetic, but it was a total blast to watch. The overall flow of the fight between Jiri and Glover, the back and forth, the ups and downs, all leading up to the exhausting and emotional moment when both fighters, slowly crawling through their exhaustion, continue to fight with all they have on the ground, only for Jiri to slowly crawl over to an almost dead Glover, and do the slowest, goofiest submission I've ever seen. That is a fight. Technicality, while desirable, and not at all removed from this fight, mind you, means nothing when compared to the emotions and grit of a fight. This fight was a masterpiece, and will likely not be topped for a long time, maybe even ever. Lastly, Jiri is the human embodiment of Netero from Hunter x Hunter, and you can't convince me otherwise. Just look at his hair, goofy hand motions and general physique. It's him, I'm telling you.